Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Fact of the Matter podcast with our co-hosts Toby
Hello?
and Goose.
Was how's it going, y'all?
Going pretty well, at least on my end.
Awesome.
So let's uh let's get right into this, and let's just talk about the importance of this Dariush versus Arman fight today. Oh, let me discuss what we are talking about today. Today we are talking about UFC Fight Night. Uh,
What is it?
Arman Arman Tsarukyan versus Beneil Dariush. And
Yes.
Yes.
why don't we talk about the importance of this fight and what it means for the lightweight division?
For sure.
Uh, I'll go first. This I think this fight is very important as it's either a fight for Dariush where he doesn't or he leaves the top five and isn't and is far away from title contention, and it's the first time Arman Saryukin will be ranked in the top five and be close to a title shot, maybe a rematch with Islam. I think.
Mm.
I think. I think this fight. I think whoever wins, I think they are either one fight away from a title shot or should get
Mm.
the next title shot, depending on how Oliveira versus Islam goes. And
Mm.
I don't think Islam get the shot at welterweight.
yeah, and why don't we? That's my take. Let's see who's next.
Yeah, so I agree with you. I think it's definitely a fight that has that hanging around. I think I was talking to my cousin the other day about this fight, and I don't know if it's an unpopular opinion that I have. I do think the winner of this fight should be fighting for a title next, and my reasoning would be that I don't really see who Islam would fight next in the lightweight division. Um, I would see a Beneil Dariush coming off a win of Arman, sure, off a loss of Oliveira, but that guy is just going to get a title shot now, surely. And Arman would just have, again, like you said, the storyline with Oliveira. And my point being is just I wouldn't see who else would get the shot besides Gaethje. However, I have a lot of problems with seeing Gaethje getting a title shot with his last five fights, two of his losses being in title fights. But I agree with you. The importance there definitely lies on um, who will be getting a title shot and seeing how Dariush looks, especially off of that finish of Charles, and hopefully if he can recuperate from that well, and if Armin can hold himself well in the top five.
Yeah, no, I agree, and you bring good points because there is well, obviously it depends who wins between Islam and Charles, right?
100%.
Um, what's that?
100%. Sorry, like 100%. Like I
Oh
agree.
yeah, yeah, no, I mean because if Charles wins, I don't think Beneil is gonna get the shot just because I mean he beat him on the first round, by knockout too. So I
Mm.
think if Beneil wins and Charles win, then I think we'll see the rematch between Oliveira and Gaethje. But if Islam beats Charles, I think the winner of this fight absolutely should get the next shot. Unfortunately, I am not very confident in that happening just because Justin Gaethje. Well, two things, like Dana White privilege. So, Islam Makhachev might just be gifted a title shot against Leon or Kobe. It's gonna be Leon. But or they'll just go for Justin Gaethje because I mean, Gaethje is the bigger name, so I think that's the most likely thing to happen. But if Charles wins and Beneil win, I think Beneil and Gaethje should fight most likely, and maybe Islam against Arman,
Mm.
for or Arman versus Oliveira. That's a great fight, and it's hard to go wrong in my opinion. They're all great matchups anyway, but
Mm.
yeah.
Yeah, I definitely agree, and I would say it's like if Arman wins, I think he will be closer to getting a title shot than if Dariush wins, depending on how that Islam
Mm,
versus
I
Oliveira
agree.
happens.
Mm.
I
Yeah.
think I wouldn't be surprised if they just went for that rematch between Arman and Islam, given their first match was so close.
Yeah.
Uh, I do believe if Oliveira wins, I agree. I think they give him Gaethje, and I think if Oliveira beats Islam, I think the winner of Dariush versus Arman should fight Islam, as both those fights are interesting fights for
Mm.
Islam. And obviously, we have the Islam going up a weight class, which
I hope it doesn't happen.
I think if Leon wins, he's not going to give Islam the title shot. I think if anything, he's going to go up. He's talking himself about going up a weight class. But if Colby
Really?
wins,
Oh,
if Colby wins, I definitely see him going. Yeah, I want Islam.
Mhm.
oh yeah. Yeah, he wants the lightweights. Yeah, no. But what do you think about the card, guys? I mean, it's a pretty damn stacked card. Very happy
it's
with it.
it's a very good card, especially considering this last card. While the fights were decently entertaining, it wasn't as big as this card is going to be.
Hmm. Yeah, it's definitely the on the higher end for a fight night, and it's definitely something I want to see a pattern more of, especially seeing names like Misha Tate um, in the prelims, and we're getting some good fights in the prelims, and we're getting a main card that already from the first fight on from Khalil Roundtree versus Azamat Muzakhanov, it's starting off great, and it's just continuing great, and we've got former champions, we've got fan favorites in the co-main. It looks like a great match, great fight night for sure.
Yeah, honestly, I have no clue why Hooker and Green are the co-main event, but it'll be a fun fight anyway.
Mm.
But honestly, it feels to me, or for the hardcore like fan, I guess, it feels like a pay-per-view event. That's how stacked it is. I mean, we have Guerra and Joaquim Silva in the on the prelims. That's gonna be such a banger, and
Oh
that's
yeah,
a fight that usually opens a main card, or it's like the last on the prelims of a pay-per-view event, right?
Mm.
So yeah, very happy with this.
another thing is we're getting the Davis and Figueredo bantamweight debut. That's going to be another interesting thing to see.
And a
So,
welterweight debut of Calvin Gastelum as well. There's a lot of that happening in this card for sure.
definitely. All right. Why don't we get into our breakdowns
Mm.
for this fight between Armand and Dariush?
Hmm.
Going into this fight, it's two grapplers going at it, and usually when we see two grapplers fight, given both of these guys, it mainly comes down to who wins the striking. We've seen Dariush versus Gamrot, Armand versus Gamrot. Those two fights, well, at least should have been decided in the striking. The judges didn't really want to give Armand any favors during that fight, but
Hmm.
we saw at least versus Dariush, we saw it came down to striking. And going into this, uh, when I watch their tape, I definitely see that Armand is a much crisper striker and is way more well rounded on the feet. His
Hmm.
kicks, he's got an insane body kick. He's got a great head kick. He's fast with it. His hands are pretty fast. One problem is he
Hmm.
definitely leaves his chin out. And going
Yeah.
into Dariush's striking, he's very much a dirty boxer, and he loves
Mm.
to just get in and create a brawl. And
Mm.
we see it versus Tony Ferguson versus Gamrot versus Oliveira. He went into firefights, and we even fights before that we see him get into firefights, and we know he's got power as he hurt Gamrot in that third round where he dropped him, and he's even against Tony, he was landed heavy. Uh, Oliveira's a different story as he didn't really get going on the feet. He did have some good strikes,
Mm.
but
Mm.
and I think another thing that is worrying me, or that is making it hard for me to decide who wins, is uh, Arman Tsarukyan's stamina. we see against Gamrot, he slowed down in the fourth and fifth round.
Mm-hmm.
Dariush, I don't think we have seen him go 5 rounds. I could be wrong about that, but he definitely seems like he has that ability to be able to go 5 rounds, and it'll be interesting. It will definitely be an interesting fight. I think on the feet, it's definitely going to be. It's going to come down to, does Arman's crisper striking win against the Dariush's dirty boxing?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, I think it's a very hard fight to predict, to be honest. I try to go back to like their earlier fights, some fights where they struggled a little bit, just especially to see how they each grappled. But the more I watched these fights, the more I started to look into the striking difference, and I think something pretty telling, at least, or like one fight that I looked into just to compare was Beneil against Vieira and Beneil against how do you call him? Carlos Oliveira, you know? Because Diego Ferreira, I think they fought in 2020 or 2021, and boy, Beneil was looking a lot like his striking looked a lot better against Gamrot and Oliveira. Even though he got knocked out, but the way he was striking against Ferreira. Well, one thing to note is that Beneil is a southpaw, same as Islam, and I think that presents some challenges for Arman. I don't think he's as comfortable striking, but looking back at Arman's fight against Islam Makhachev and his like more recent fights, like the one I think against Joaquim, was it Joaquim Silva? Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
Yes, it
against
was.
Silva. You know, or even against Gamrot. Like whenever Gamrot was switching stances, I did see that he was more comfortable. He knew what to do. He knew he always went for like a hard body kick. But this time he was actually setting up the 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 kicks. So and the body kicks are probably one of his biggest weapons in the striking. Um, I do think that the grappling will kind of shut, like they will shut each other down, in the grappling. I think, if anything, um, I think Benil will want to grapple, and Arman will want to strike. And but I trust more in Arman's ability to control where the fight takes place. But yeah, that being said, yeah, it's a very nuanced fight. I know I'm kind of rambling a bit, but with that being said, I do think that if Arman chooses to grapple, he'll be in more trouble than Dariush. And I don't think any takedown will be successful, but in scrambles, I think Dariush will have the better of those exchanges just because of his jiu-jitsu experience. His ground and pound is really slow, though. I'll say that much.
Mm-hmm.
That remained true against Ferreira and against Charles. So I really don't see that as a way of winning. But yeah, I think the most likely scenario, in my opinion, is probably a decision or maybe I don't know, maybe a knockout, more likely. But
Mm-hmm.
but yeah, no, it's a very intriguing fight, especially because of the weapons they use in the striking and how that matches up with the stances. Very intriguing. What do you think,
Uh,
Toby?
I agree with a lot of points that you guys made. I feel like I'm coming from this angle a little bit from less research because I definitely could have done a lot more watching of tape. But I think I'm coming off of this like with um, especially highlighting the context here. I would say Benil's coming off of the finish, and Armin's coming off of a performance where he did get hurt quite badly against Joaquim. And so I think they've both got a lot to prove. It's This is a really high stakes fight for both of them to be in the top five and into the contention of it. I trust a lot more in Benil with his composure. I trust his takedown defense quite a lot. especially with the Gamrot fight. We just saw him shut down Gamrot from like a grappling point of view, and then we saw Arman did have a close fight. As much as we can argue if it was a close fight or not, Arman and Gamrot was a very close fight. The grappling was beautiful. But I trust more in Beneil, especially to be able to stay composed and be able to nullify a little bit from the just the takedown defense aspect of it. And from a striking perspective, I think what Jackson brought up about the head kicks and Armin having good kicks as well is a big point as well that I'm a little bit scared for with Beneil, especially with the last finish being um, started off with the head kicks that Charles Oliveira was
Mm.
doing. So I'm really tough with picking this fight, to be honest. I think there's a lot of mystery with how Beneil will look after getting finished, especially. But I'm leaning like if 55-45, like in percentage wise, towards Beneil in winning from like a decision.
Go for the decision. Yeah, no, I think that's likely to be. I
Yeah.
think that's the most likely scenario as well, personally.
Mm.
I
And
think
Jackson brought up that it'll be mostly striking, and I agree with that point as well. The grappling here is going to be, I feel, quite nullified in that sense.
I definitely agree. And going into more of the grappling, as you were talking about, Goose, you were talking about with who's going to be more willing to take it to the ground. I do think Armand is definitely going to shoot more and try and take it to the ground more than
Mm.
Dariush. One thing with it is Armand's uh, grappling is or his wrestling was very good. Uh, he's very good at stopping. He's stopping takedowns. I mean, Islam struggled to take him down in their fights. Islam had him in full mount with an arm trapped, and
Mm.
he was able to stand up completely from that just effortlessly. I do think on the ground, Armand is definitely going to struggle with Dariush. Dariush very good at sweeping people. You see him do it versus Gamrot a ton, going for leg lock.
Interesting to me.
Yeah, leg lock sweeps where he's not necessarily going for a leg lock, but if it's there, he will definitely get it. But I do think it's very interesting, and for my prediction for this fight, I do think early on, I definitely think Armand is going to get the better on the feet. But I think once Dariush gets going, I do believe his striking will take advantage. But another thing that Taco or Toby mentioned is that uh, we don't know how good Dariush is going to be after this knockout, this TKO loss. TKO
Mm.
losses do affect people,
Yeah.
Mm.
and it's going to be interesting to see how he bounces back. I do believe he will bounce back correctly, but for my final pick, I am picking uh, Dariush 48-47, unanimous decision.
Mm.
Hmm.
Interesting, interesting. Well, there's a lot to unpack there, but I think I do think one of the biggest things, like that I'll be on the lookout for, will be how Benil defends head kicks, because he actually did block Oliveira's head kick on his last fight, but only with one arm. And something Benil does a lot for defense is that he leans towards his left. And being a southpaw, that's just not a great thing to do, especially against a guy with, great kicks. As a guy like Arman, that's like his thing, But so yeah, I think if Arman wins, it's gonna be, in my opinion, it's gonna be by either TKO, catching him early with body kicks, and then with a really big head kick and follow with ground and pound, or against the cage. Um, but if Benil deals with the distance well, and Arman does move like a lot better, I think Benil could just steal rounds just by landing his left hand, because his left hand is easily his best weapon in the striking. He's not the fastest guy, but he has very good timing and he has a lot of power. And that's a left hand was what got Arman in trouble when he was exchanging against Joaquim Silva. You know, because when he went to exchange with Silva, was that Joaquim just stood his ground and Arman just basically took pictures of his work. Like he threw a couple of shots, he stood and then he got caught bad. And I don't know. I think Beneil would be a bit more intentional, you know,
Hmm.
with his striking. So ultimately, I think ah, I think I'm leaning by Arman by split decision now. Just
Mm.
like stealing the early rounds with big body kicks, I think. And Arman might like still like the last 2 rounds or so. I don't know. I think it'll be a close fight for sure. A knockout would not surprise me in the slightest, but a submission would, ironically.
Interesting. And so for the co-main then, we've got Hooker versus Green. We've got Dan Hooker coming off a win of Jalen Turner, and we have Bobby Green coming off the win from Grant Dawson. Um, in terms of this fight here, I think it's going to be a fun fight, that's for certain. Um, and I'm leaning towards Hooker when it comes to this one, especially with the idea that I feel like Hooker has proven himself to not win against top high elite opponents, but he's shown in those fights that he does have quite the heart. He has the ability to survive in some dogfights. Um, and I just think his experience against the elite fighters is going to show here. I don't think that Bobby Green, in my opinion, has ever really proven himself against elite opponents with the exception of, I would say, the Fiziev fight. I think other
Hmm.
fights to me is just kind of. I've never really been a big fan of his, and I'm not really like. I would say on the Bobby Green train. And maybe that bias might play into effect. I would sure, but I'm leaning towards Hooker here, especially with that experience. And like I'm thinking, if Bobby Green tries to actually play with Hooker in creating this and making this a dogfight, I think it's not going to go well for him. And I'm just seeing Hooker win by UD.
Yeah, um, going into this fight between Hooker and Green, I go into their past performances, and Hooker was on a skid for a little bit, but he was facing some pretty good guys. I mean, he fought Chandler, fought Islam, he fought Arnold Allen, all these
Hmm.
guys who are pretty good fighters, and then we get into Bobby Green, and I mean, looking at he had a pretty good win over Grant Dawson, but Grant Dawson doesn't really have a chin. I mean,
Hmm.
you see him get hurt. Uh, you see him get hurt in most of his fights. I think the only one he did was Demir, and Demir didn't land anything substantial. And going into this fight, when I look at Bobby Green's performance versus Tony Ferguson, I mean, we all love Tony here, but Tony is on a skid, and he doesn't look as good. But when we look at his performance against Tony, he didn't look good, and that's why I'm picking Dan Hooker by unanimous decision, if not a knockout.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think. Hmm. I think interesting. Both of you guys are picking Hooker. I mean, I expected Bobby to be the favorite for most fans just because of Bobby's. I mean, Bobby's boxing, I think, is cleaner. To be honest, I do think he has the better footwork and head movement for sure. But I do think Hooker. Well, one, he has a great team behind him, and two, you guys are right. I mean, Bobby didn't look great against Tony. Watch Tony, until he eye poked him. So it's okay. I'm not salty. I'm not salty. Uh, I really am, but but I think Hooker's team will be able to look at the tape and time those shots. I think Hooker will bring leg kicks to stop the movement and will try, leg kicks, body kicks, eat everything Bobby has, and then try to catch him. But ah, I don't think it'll be a knockout though. I think it'll be a slugfest. Um, Man, I'm to be honest, I'm kind of leaning. I'm leaning Bobby just because I expect him to land a lot. But um, yeah, I think it'll be close. But I think Bobby will outwork Hooker, even though Hooker might do slightly more damage. But based purely on how much damage Hooker eats on every fight, I think the judges will give it to Bobby. But okay, so how about we talk about Fontaine Figgy? Oh my God, ah, that's an exciting fight. Um, I don't really know who to lean towards on that one, to be honest, just because I have no clue how Figgy will look like at his new weight class. Um, we do know that he was a massive weight bully, and we do know. I mean, I'm assuming that his power will carry through. However, we also know that Font has a really good chin. I mean, he took a lot of shots by Aldo and Chito, but that could also mean that, his chin might just be gone. Um, I expect Figgy to have better grappling, but the thing that worries me about Figgy is that his style, like his striking style, is very similar to, you know, like Issy, where he lifts his chin like in the air, baits you for counters, and then, counters. But Font, like one of his main weapons is the jab, and I think if he keeps peppering Figgy with the jab, if he keeps landing, I think he'll actually hurt Figgy, and we might see a TKO. So that's what I'm leaning towards, Font by TKO.
Mm. Interesting, interesting indeed. I'm really keen for this fight. I'm a very big Figgy fan. I'm also a big fan of Font, to be honest. I remember praising him quite a lot a while back, and definitely feeling like his boxing is one of some of the best in his division and very underrated for sure. That being said, I am worried about Figgy moving up, and especially because my prediction here is very hinged, especially on Figgy's power and how we saw how much power he had um, back in flyweight. So I kind of have a feeling that Figgy will still be able to land on Font. Font has shown to get dropped quite often and to be exposed usually by some of those hard shots. So I'm kind of feeling that Figgy will be able to get a shot. I don't know about putting Font out, but I also do think Figgy has quite an underrated and high level grappling, such to a point that I think if he does manage to drop Font, that he'll be able to follow him onto the ground and sub him there. So my prediction for this fight is a sub in the second round by Figgy.
Interesting. I like it.
Mm.
Interesting, yeah, very much indeed. Going into this fight, we know the striking of these two, and we know, watching the Font versus Cheeto and Font versus Aldo fights, we know he can take a punch. Obviously, as you said, we don't know if his chin is still there. He did get dropped versus Cheeto, but he was able to rebound. Going into this fight, Figgy had a ton of power at 125, and you look at it and you bring him up to 135. We don't know how he's going to do. Striking technical wise, he wasn't the most technical fighter, technical striker. He kind of just landed well, and when he did land, he would hurt you. And we see versus Brandon Moreno. Moreno was outstriking him a ton, and and we get to that third fight though, where he was a little bit more of a counter strike, but we get to those first two fights, and there was more that he's just swinging wild. However, one thing going into this fight is the grappling of Figgy. Figgy has amazing wrestling and amazing jiu-jitsu, and Font obviously didn't look. I believe he didn't look the best versus Corey, and I think I'm going to predict Figgy to win by round one submission.
Ooh, we're gonna have
Damn.
both of us with
Okay, okay.
submissions here.
I am a bit surprised, to be honest, by the picking of submission. I mean, I do think Fig is the better grappler though, but intriguing. Maybe I didn't think about it enough.
Maybe we will see December 2nd in 2 weeks. But going into Sean Brady versus Kevin Gastelum, Brady hasn't fought since he lost to Bilal Muhammad,
Oh
and
boy.
yeah, obviously the goat.
Mm, the
but
goat, correct.
we we watched that fight, and when I watch it, it was Brady got outstriked by Bilal Muhammad, a guy who has zero power, and somehow got knocked out or TKO'd by him. And we go to Kevin Gastelum, and while he is cutting down to welterweight, and we don't know what that weight cut's going to do to him, he was able to strike with Izzy that one time, and he was decent against everyone he fought at middleweight, while even being uh, honestly undersized for that weight class. And we go to that, and I think Brady hasn't fought since that loss to Bilal Muhammad. Kevin Gastelum is coming off a win against Chris Curtis, and I think uh, the grappling wise, I don't know who I think Sean Brady is a bit better, but I don't know if it will be a factor. If it does hit the ground, I do think Sean Brady could get a submission, but I'm going to pick Kevin Gastelum by round two TKO.
Yeah, I think I did think about pretty much the same things you mentioned, or at least most of them. But the main thing that worries me is, yeah, Sean Brady's chin. I mean, his defense just wasn't there against Bilal. Bilal just completely overwhelmed him with volume and ended up. I think that was his second knockout ever in his career, I believe. So the fact that Bilal was able to do that to Brady, really not great. However, that was because Brady could not take it to the ground. So the question then is, can Gastelum keep it standing, right? Um, I do think like him going down to welterweight will give him a nice a nice advantage for size, but I do worry a little bit about his, yeah, just his wrestling defense. I do think Brady will be able to take it to the ground, but I do not trust his ability to finish Gastelum, at least not early. And eventually, I do see Gastelum getting like probably a late TKO. Otherwise, I think Brady by decision. But I do think Gastelum will be able to crack him, especially on his entries. So yeah, that's what
For
I
me,
think. What about you, Toby?
For me, I think it's a little bit of a toss up. I'm going to be completely honest. I think we are dealing with Sean Brady, which you've both mentioned. Striking wise, there is a lot to be begged for there, especially after the Bilal finish. But Bilal is the GOAT. I will not tolerate this Bilal slander that you guys are saying. However, um, I think the problem with me as well is I don't know if I trust Kelvin Gastelum. He had the 2 year layoff, came back against Chris Curtis. That fight was really close. I don't think he possessed any of his finishing ability that he showed in his earlier years in that fight. I don't. I personally came out of that fight thinking I wasn't a huge like I didn't think it was the best win for him as well. And I think as well dealing with this new division that he's in, I have a lot more questions than answers when it comes to Kelvin Gastelum.
Mhm.
And if there's anything that I trust the most coming into this fight, it's that I don't think Kelvin's going to put Sean Brady out. I'm going to be completely honest. But that's always the question with Sean Brady. Will he be able to get put out? He got put out by Bilal. That's a question in my head. But then I also think the other constant is Sean Brady does have good wrestling. Like, it's the one thing that he does possess. Is like the one thing that won him fights against Chiesa, and that was his grappling and his wrestling. Because he also lost that fight on the striking. So I kind of trust Sean Brady's grappling to be more. I think he's going to win through kind of a boring uh, kind of lay and pray style bit. I'm not gonna lie. So I've got Sean Brady by a UD in a not very entertaining win.
Mm. Yeah, no, you bring up good point about Gastelum's, you know, latest track record.
Mm.
It definitely isn't great. And I mean, okay, we can shit on Bilal because it's fun, but credit where credit is due. He is an intelligent striker, even if he's not
Mm-hmm.
the best. I mean, he was able to also strike Luke, for example.
Mm-hmm.
And he fights smart, and maybe I am giving too like the benefit of the doubt too much to Kevin, in that regard. So yeah, good point. Good point. Yeah, I do think Brady by decision is
Mm.
likely as well. But
For sure.
I'm hoping Kevin comes through.
And I don't know what that Bilal slander you're talking about. What do you mean? He definitely is the GOAT. He's beaten
Right, right, right.
Leon Edwards. He's gonna beat
Oh
Colby
my
Covington.
God.
No,
Yes.
he's gonna outstrike Leon Edwards. He's gonna outgrapple Colby Covington. He's gonna.
People
For
will
sure.
remember the name.
But to wrap things up, why don't we just? I believe Toby and I wanted to talk a little bit about the Khalil Roundtree fight. Goose, do you want
Mm-hmm.
to as well?
Man, to be honest, nah.
Yeah,
I don't really care about that fight. I'm just, if
yeah,
a knockout comes, I'll be happy with it. But it's
yeah.
whatever.
Uh, Toby, you want to go first on that Khalil
That's
Roundtree
so
fight?
cool. To be honest, I haven't seen as many fights in terms of Azamat Muzakanov's fights. I have seen his highlights. They look fantastic, I will say. Um, I do think I really am a big Khalil Roundtree fighter fan himself. I love the his Muay Thai style for sure. I think that's like the very common sentiment expressed by a lot of MMA fans nowadays, especially. Everyone really loves um, the him taking on board the Muay Thai aspect after his Johnny Walker loss. I think this fight's going to be a really enjoyable fight from his the stand up, and it's going to be all hinged on that first round. I don't think it will escape the first round. I think we either see an Azamat finish or a Khalil finish. And when it comes to it, I have more faith in Khalil and his consistency, and especially because of the levels that we're dealing with here. I think Azamat's just coming off of a win against Dustin Jacoby, and I don't really hold him to quite a high regard, to be completely honest. I know they both have wins over him, but when it comes to being more proven, to having some more devastating finishes and some high IQ in terms of especially in the Muay Thai aspect, which I do fancy quite a lot. I'm backing up Khalil Roundtree here by a round one KO/TKO.
Yeah, I look at that fight and I very much enjoy it. I don't know too much about um Amaz or Azamat or whatever, however you say his name, but I don't know too much about him. I've watched a bit of his highlights, and yeah, I do agree with you. I think this fight is going to end round one, and going into the fights, Azatman hasn't really beaten too many good fighters. Like as you said, he beat Dustin Jacoby. Before that, he beat Devin Clark, and
Mm-hmm.
y- y- and looking at that fight, and you look at Khalil Roundtree, who has looked so good in his last couple fights. I mean, he KO round one, Chris uh, Dakuis. Then he had the decision against Dustin Jacoby, and before that, he had a round two KO against Carl Robinson. And I do believe that he is going to KO or KO/TKO uh, Azatman, and I do think that uh, Khalil Roundtree is just going to be on this win streak for a little bit, and I do believe he will win by first round KO/TKO.
Mm-hmm.
All right, that wraps up this week's episode. Uh, we'll see you
I'm
guys
so pumped
next
for
week.
this card.
I am
Thank you
too.
both.
It's going to be a great part. All right, catch everyone next week. Every Monday, I think, is what we're aiming for. And
Oh yeah.
we'll see you guys next week. Bye.
Bye.